Welcome everybody. My name's John Gallagher with the Clink Different campaign in Texas, USA. Really excited for everybody to be here today. And more importantly, thank you for being with us on this entire Clink Different Academy journey for the last 5 months. We've really come full circle with this VIP seminar. So excited today. I'm going to be moderating. We have 2 experts, which I think some of you guys will recognize. Again, coming full circle. We have 2 people that were with us at our very beginning, going over exactly what is up to date with numbers here in Germany and then also in Bordeaux. But we'll move on to the next slide if you don't mind, Alexa. So just a quick reminder that we are doing a recording on this. So if you want to shut off your video, please feel free to do that if you're a little bit shy, but we are going to be recording this just for quality assurance and record keeping on our side. And we'll jump into the next slide as well. So laying the ground rules, a little bit different than how we've done it in the past. Please use chat. But in the past with our seminars, we've done it where it's been participants, where it's all done through chat. Whereas today, we want to see you, you can see us, and we want you guys to have an interactive conversation with our 2 experts. We're going to be doing sensory evaluations. We're going to be having a lot of fun, and we're going to be doing this to be able to say thank you to you guys for participating with us. So long story short, we're trusting you with the mute button. So if you have a question, unmute, ask a question. We're here. We're going to be here for about the next 60 minutes, just to have some fun, taste some wine, have some conversation, and hopefully continue our education together. But talking about continuing of education, the question that I have, and you're more than welcome to go off mute or go into the chat feature, is who wants to continue their education by winning a trip for 2 worth $18,000 to go to Bordeaux in Germany in Q1 of next year? My hand's gone up. Stefan and Wendy, who are our experts, their hands went up. So long story short, stick around until the end. We'll give you guys the website. We are actually running a Clink Different sweepstakes with a grand prize trip for 2 worth $18,000. We'll give you all the details for you guys to be able to get involved with that. And more importantly, you can actually enter once per day to increase your odds of winning that amazing trip. So highly encourage everybody to be able to do that, because it's going to be a great opportunity to be able to continue your education live and in person in the vineyards over there. So we'll jump into the next slide and be able to talk about our team of experts. Unfortunately, we might have a guest that comes in at the very end to be determined, but the 2 people that we have with us as of right now, and really excited to see them again in the friendship that we've formed over the last 5 months. So first is Wendy Narby, Bordeaux educator and author. Really excited to have her back again, coming full circle, and really excited to be able to share this evening with you, Wendy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. And then out of Germany, and a person that has definitely been leading some interesting life. If you have an opportunity to talk with Stefan, we were just being regaled about his background of winning game shows coming out of college and making money from winning game shows, including Jeopardy and multiple other things. The man has a very fascinating life, but more importantly, he's the deputy director of the Deutsche Wine Institute. Stefan Schindler, we're excited to have you back as well.
Yes, good evening, good Abend. This was highly confidential so far, John.
I'm sorry, I had to share it. It's too good. It's too good. And then we have 2 other guests. One, unfortunately, Nicholas Pfaff had a last-minute cancellation and he was not able to join us this evening. But then we also might have a sneak guest with Sally Evans, hopefully being able to join us here in just a little while. She's actually at 10 o'clock, just like Wendy is over in the Indian Ocean. And long story short, they're joining us very late, so we're hoping that Sally might be able to make a guest appearance. But with that being said, we'll move into kind of what we're going to be talking about. So from an agenda, we're just going to recap the Clink Different series. And again, thank you guys for being with us on that. And then we're going to start having some fun. We're going to dive into the wine. We'll talk about our sweepstakes, and then again, conclusion-wise, we're here to be able to answer questions throughout. So please, if you have any questions, just go off of mute, ask a question, or type it into the chat. We're going to have some fun. So we'll jump into the seminar series. So 6 months ago, the Clink Different Academy, we started out with By the Numbers, where if anybody was attending that, Stefan, Wendy, and a few other guests, we had a great time reviewing the most up-to-date numbers. And then going through the entire series, the efforts that we wanted to do from Clink Different was to really showcase the movement towards, and kind of a common thread was biodiversity, organic, and moving towards this green idea. And we really brought that in from our climate shift, the rise of rosé, which has definitely had an impact from climate. We also had US Market Watch, which is surprising changes of what has happened from climate, what's happened from pallets, what's happened across the board with the German exports and the Bordeaux exports. And then we dove into exactly what we were talking about, which was the biodiversity, organic, and biodynamics. We had a lot of great guests and a lot of different chateaus being able to be represented. And then it went into mitigating drought. After that, the new generation of people that are coming in and pioneering new work, new thinking, and new thought processing, and then the modern day cuisine, which was, I think, very timely for us as we move into the holidays here and across the globe. The biggest thing that I can also say, though, is that if you missed any of these and you have any interest, you can go to clinkdifferent.com. And if you go to our trade and media link on clinkdifferent.com, all of our videos have been published. You can go back, watch them, grab a glass of wine if you have any interest to be able to continue your education if you so happen to miss. So we'll move on from here and go into our just 2 quick slides and then start talking wine. So we have one question to everybody, and you're more than welcome to go off mute or raise your hand or jump into the chat. But percentage of vineyards, trending green, our common theme that we've had for this last 6 months. Does anybody have a guess on the percentage of vineyards that are sustainable in Bordeaux and Germany? Jay, 60%. Alyssa, I saw Alyssa looking up and like contemplating really deeply. Alyssa, we have Samantha and Jessica, 50%, 30%, 15%, 65%. We have some pretty large pendulum swings going on here. I love it. Well, we will go to the next slide, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to Wendy to talk about Bordeaux, and then Stefan to talk about Germany.
Perfect. Well, I thought the 60 was really interesting because it was 60, sort of the last count, but we just had an update and it's gone up to 75% in Bordeaux. So this is not organic, it's sustainable. The biggest sustainable label that we have in Bordeaux and actually across France is this Haute Valeur Environnementale, so HVE, which is a really interesting sustainable label because it covers several things that we've talked about in the series. So obviously sort of this movement towards sustainable agriculture, but it also covers social sustainability and social responsibility. So I think that's it's quite an interesting label to have. But of course, we do have organic and we do have biodynamic and we do have the other, well, you can see this long list of European certifications that we have for different levels of sustainability in Europe. So, lots of diversity within that. But yeah, I'm very thrilled that we've got up to 75%. We have sort of 100% objective, obviously. But what is wonderful to see the engagement from really just about everybody across Bordeaux in this sustainable, responsible agriculture. So yeah, exciting.
Perfect. Thanks, Wendy. And we actually had a really great question that just came in. And it's from Sarah. What sprays are allowed in the sustainable label?
Oh, it's a very good question. I'm not sure. I think with the HVE, the actual products are quite closely controlled, but it's also about when and how much. So I know, for example, the Bouilly Bordelais, the Bordeaux mixture is allowed. Even in organic, the Bordeaux mixture, so the copper sulfate and is allowed, but in tiny amounts. So within this certification, there's this notion of not doing a prophylactic treatment. So it's not treating just in case. It's this idea of really treating the vineyards only when you absolutely have to, with certain recommended products. And I don't know what they are. I don't have the list in my head. But this idea as well of modeling the disease. So of course, the big problem that we have in Bordeaux is mildew, and especially this year. I'm sure we'll talk about the 21 at some point. So it was a really tricky vintage for mildew this year. But the idea is that we're modeling these diseases in a way that we can tell producers when to treat and how much to treat. So it's this notion within sustainability of not only controlling what we use, but when we use it and how much. So that's not an exact answer, but off the top of my head, I'm sorry, it's the best I can do.
It sounded pretty good to me, Wendy. So we'll throw it over to Stefan. Stefan, how about in Germany?
Yeah, perhaps I can just add, I don't know if everybody is really aware of the differences between organic, biodynamic, and sustainable, because there was questions, obviously, a question usually asked when we talk about organic wine growing, because we have those two trends now, and they do overlap, but there are two objectives. And the first one, which was always there, which has been there for a long time, is organic, which means that you try to avoid any kind of chemicals in the cellar, but mostly in the vineyards. And that's where the organic wine growers come from. Sustainable is something different, because here we want to work in a way that is sustainable, which means that it's socially correct. And it goes beyond the treatment in the vineyard or in the cellar. It's also talking about how we treat our workers, how we pay them, if they have maternity leave, etc. It's about questions like how much water do you use when you produce wine, your CO2 footprint, etc. So it's two different ideas, both going in the same direction with the same aim, but the content is slightly different between the two. And in Germany, we actually have quite a little bit of animosities you sometimes notice between these two groups. But as I said, the long-term aim is the same. Here, you see the figures. We have certified organic about 9.4% of all German vineyards. We've just had a census last year, so it's super new figures. And that is certified by the European Union. We have many wine growers who work organically, but as it is not certified, we cannot count that. When it comes to biodynamic wine growing, we also see growth. We have now about 1,000 hectares out of 100,000 in Germany, which are biodynamic certified. So they're members of Demeter or Respect Biodyn. You see the two labels on the bottom right. And what is interesting from the consumer side point of view is that the German consumers want organic products. And that's reflected in the fact that almost 24% of all organic wine which is produced on this planet is actually sold in Germany. So really have a very strong home market for organic wines. When we come to sustainable, we have not agreed what our friends in Bordeaux have done, which is great. We have not in Germany yet agreed on a common standard. So we have Respect Biodyn, we have Demeter, we have some other organizations, but we don't have a common model everybody has agreed upon. And our major wine university, Geisenheim, they have joined an international program. They've just published that, which is called Sustainable Wine Roundtable. And we hope that this is going to set standards which we can then put through to the German wine industry as a whole. So that's the situation over here in Germany. John, we can't hear you. If you're
I know, I'm so sorry. I was in the chat and about to respond to some things, and I kept hitting my unmute button, but it kept bringing the chat back up. So I apologize about that. And what I find fascinating about that, Stefan, is something that you said, and it sounds like it's a common thread, is that a lot of people are actually moving towards and already doing a lot of this practice with either organic or heading into sustainable ways, but just haven't gone through the certification process. And is that something because of costs? Is it something because of what are you seeing as kind of we're moving in this direction.
We have a very big surge at the moment. When we see the young people coming from university, they really want to go organic. I think it's the same in Bordeaux. It's not only because the market demands organic wine, it's also has a lot to do with the upbringing of our next generation of young people who just want to leave a cleaner and healthier planet to the young. So it's one hand, it's conviction by the side of the producers. On the other hand, is the market which demands these wines. But still, we see producers who don't go organic because we have years like this year, which has been, as Wendy said, super difficult for our organic wine producers because they are quite limited in the measures, the sprays they can use, and which in a wet year like this year meant that they had to go out almost every other day spraying. So the costs are incredibly high in a year like this, and the amount of time you have to spend is enormous. And I know wine growers who say, I really try everything to work organic, but in a year like this, I want to be able to resort to chemicals because there's just almost no other way. Wendy, I hope that, I guess it's the same.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yes, I agree. And I think it's very, very similar in Bordeaux too. And of course, there's the argument, if you're looking at your carbon footprint, that if I do have to go through my vineyard again and again and again in a year where you've got a lot of humidity, you're using your tractors more often. So, it's a delicate balance between this notion of sustainability. Do I really want to go through the vineyard again with my tractor if it's raining? And I also would agree with your idea about this younger generation being much more sensitive, I think, to the notion of sustainability. And in Bordeaux, and I'm sure it's the same in Germany, the vast majority of these vineyards are family-run properties and family-owned properties. And many of them have been in the family for several generations. So you've got this notion of sustainability over several generations. And I think in a sense of responsibility from the younger generation coming in, and that they've inherited something from their parents, from their grandparents, and they hope to leave it for their children. So this notion of sustainability, yes, it's about the immediate, but also I think for a lot of young people in particular, it's a long-term vision of having this heritage and this responsibility, this stewardship, if you like, of these vineyards. So I think that's something that young people are very aware of.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think we'll continue this common theme and let's get to some fun and let's get into some bottles. So with that being said, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan and Wendy, but all 4 wines that we are having tonight are certified organic.
Yep.
Fantastic. So we are on theme and on trend. So Alexa, if you don't mind, we'll jump into our wines, and we're going to start with Stefan. And our first wine for this evening for the tasting is going to be Clemens Busch.
Yes, I've poured it already. So we are in the Mosel Valley. The wine estate is called Clemens Busch. Just so you hear the word pronounced correctly for once. This one isn't not that difficult, John. Clemens Busch. There are more difficult ones. Riesling, obviously 100%, and vom roten Schiefer. That's already a bit more difficult. Means from red slate, and that's already. You can see that already on the bottle because the capsule is slightly reddish, and that in that wine estate, by the color of the capsule, they show you already from what kind of slate the wine comes from. You can see on the label, well, as we start to drink, you can start drinking already if you want to, but I want to show you the label. It's all around the bottle. You can see it. It's 11-point alcohol, so quite low. And I think that is one of the major assets of German winemaking. The fact, as you all know, lighter wines, wine with less alcohol are definitely in demand at the moment everywhere. And we've had those quite low alcohol wines in Germany for centuries. And that is a very good example with 11%. We are in the Mosel Valley. So perhaps first of all, let's drink it first. Let's go. I don't want to keep you waiting. Fill your glass and have a sip of this wonderful wine. So will I. And you will notice where we are. We are in a very northerly climate, the Mosel. It's the most northerly white wine region, has been since now. Now, as you all know, it's moving north, the frontier of winemaking, but it has always been the most northerly white wine region in the world with these light wines, and it can hardly speak. It's so mouth-watering. I guess you have the same. Might be that I haven't eaten yet, but if that's what happens, definitely. We are in this Mosel Valley, where the River Mosel comes running from France to go to the Rhine in the west of Germany. And when you look on the map of Germany, it's meandering. It's like a snake, because millions of years ago, the river had to find its way through two mountain ranges. And that's why the Mosel is actually the region in the world with the steepest vineyards. That's also one of the reasons why we have actually seen a decline in vineyards in the last decades, because working in these vineyards is extremely time-consuming, extremely difficult and intensive. And there was a time in the 90s, beginning of 2000s, where people said, I earn my money a lot easier when I go to Frankfurt and work in a bank or do another job than working in these steep vineyards. Luckily, that decline is stopped. We have this really good young generation of winemakers who replant vineyards in the Mosel Valley, and the future is actually quite bright. It's the region in Germany which had the highest amount of exports of all German wine growing regions, even though we only have about 8,000 hectares in the Mosel. Major grape variety, obviously Riesling. It accounts for, at the moment, 62.4% of all the vineyards, so almost 2%, two-thirds of all plantings. We have a tiny amount of red wine in the Mosel, and even that tiny amount is declining, because the good news for the Mosel is that white wine consumption in Germany and many other European markets is growing, as far as I know, also in the United States. So demand is strong, and that's also what's driving young people to replant. When we come to the wine estate, the owners are Clemens and what is her name? Rita, I always forget, Bush. They've gone organic already in 1984. And that was a time when organic was definitely not fashionable, and where it was quite difficult to sell organic wines, especially here in Germany, because organic was associated with, okay, it's healthy, it's good for the environment, but it doesn't taste well. That was what many people thought about organic products in general. Luckily, that has changed completely. We can really talk here about pioneers in organic winemaking. In 2005, they have gone biodynamic, so they've gone one step further. They are members of Respect Biodyn, which is a quite young organization of sustainable winemaking. So that's also now in their portfolio. So they work biodynamically, sustainable and organic. So really, you have it all, if you like, in that wine estate. They have 5 stars out of 5 in the Vinum German Wine Guide, which just came out last week. So it's only one of about 16, I think, German wine estates, and only 5 in the Mosel, which received 5 out of 5 stars. I'll give you a lot of information, but as I have it, I'll give it to you. 99% of what they grow is Riesling, and only 1% is Spätburgunder, which is quite Pinot Noir, which is quite new in the wine estate. And they produce about 100,000 bottles. The estate has grown from 2.5 hectares to 17 in the last 30 years. So also something we see both in Bordeaux and Germany, that wine estates tend to become bigger, and we see certain concentration. It's been, as they are organic, they only use minerals and plants to bring out into the vineyards. That's the only fertilizers they are allowed, and they use spontaneous fermentation, which, as you know, is always quite a challenge, because you never know what comes out if you don't control your winemaking well enough, which they obviously do, as you can see in this wine. They use a lot of wood, which is quite unusual today, because wine, especially Riesling, is made in stainless steel. They mainly use wood. They don't any fining, fermentation, little of humans as possible. I hope you can hear me because I just see that my internet has
Yeah,
problems.
Stefan,
I
you
think it's
just
still
started to
working.
break up a little bit and you're coming back right now. Well, we actually have a couple of great
So should I
questions.
repeat everything?
I love it. I'll
Yes.
continue to work on my German pronunciation if you don't mind, but
Yeah, go ahead.
we have some great questions coming in. And Sarah has asked, is there any lees contact on Riesling?
Well, they used to avoid lees contact to get those super fresh, fruit-driven primary aroma Rieslings. That was actually what we've seen in the last 2 decades, which was more or less becoming state of the art. And which was becoming like what people wanted, those super clear, crystal clear Rieslings. But we're going backwards a bit from that. One sign is that they actually use wood, which gives a bit more, which makes the wine definitely a bit more rounder than what we've seen in the last years. And lees contact, I don't know how long it has been, but they are known for having quite a long lees contact in that wine estate in the last years. What I forgot to say is that the son of the family, Johannes, is now the one who is taking over. The next generation is there. And the older brother who should have taken over the wine estate has actually emigrated to France, but not to Bordeaux, but to the Languedoc, and he's now making wine in the Languedoc, and he's making natural wines there. And I'm absolutely convinced there's a lot of interchange between the two brothers, and that lees contact is one of the things that they must have a lot of discussion about.
I love it. I love it. Well, if you don't mind, Stefan, I would love to hear, because I do know that we got these wines over to Wendy as well, and Wendy would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's very exciting for me because I don't drink, I'm sorry to say, German wines very often. I guess it's, when you're in Bordeaux. I'm not saying that we're completely biased towards Bordeaux, but a little bit. So it's really exciting. I love Riesling. I think it's such a food-friendly wine. I really do. I think it's a wine that goes so well with so many dishes, as well as, like this, it's the perfect aperitif wine, but I find them really, really versatile. There's just a little bit of sweetness on this wine that makes you think that it would go with lots of different foods, lots of spicy foods. So I love it, but it's fresh and it's bright. It's got that great minerality. I saw a few comments coming in about blossoms and these lovely fruit aromas, but for me, it's that fresh minerality that really it's just a pleasure. As Stefan said, mouth-watering. Now you've got this lovely mouth-watering effect. So it's a delicious wine. It's a real joy.
I love it. Thanks for the feedback. And to echo off of that, it looks like Teresa and Susan, I love their adjectives here of racy, mouth-watering, lively, and fresh. I absolutely agree with that. Cool. And then before we move on to the next wine, I'll do a quick pause. Again, trusting everybody here, please go off of mute. Is there any questions before we move on to the next wine? Happy to be able to make this into a conversation.
My question would be, well, at what Brix level do you target to pick the grapes at for this alcohol level that low?
Oh, I don't know about Brix at all. So that's very difficult for me. I guess for this wine, you would have like 85 Oechsler, but that's just a wild guess. And I have no idea what that would be in Brix.
Okay, sorry.
No, great question. And from the measuring unit with Brix, I can definitely take that as a follow-up to be able to follow up with you, Gary.
Yeah, and when it comes to the vintage 2019, 2019 was one of, I think it's very nice to compare 2019 and 2021, because this year we've had, as we already heard, a quite difficult year with late blossoming and with a lot of rain, cool summer, late harvesting, and we've actually with 2021 gone back to the 1980s. Actually, that the way our vintages used to be when I was a boy, grape picking to earn some money. It was usually, the weather was usually like this year, whereas the last years and also 2019 in Germany were extremely hot, and we've seen that we are facing completely new problems in this country we didn't have before due to climate change. We are starting to learn how to deal with this, but it's really putting our wine growers in front of a lot of problems, especially if you want to make wines like the one we've just tasted with just 11 alcohol. The fact that the summers have become so hot and the blossom is so early brings about the problem that we have late frosts. The frosts are still as late as they used to be, but because the vines are blossoming earlier, we already have the shoots which are out a lot higher, and that causes a lot more damage than it used to. The same goes for hailstorms. That's the spring problems we now have in these vintages, these new climate vintages, if you like. And in summer we have problems with sunburn. That's something we've never had before. We really have to protect the grapes now so they won't burn. And the major problem is actually these super high alcohol levels we could have in Germany. 20 years ago, we discussed how can we make our red wines denser, more alcoholic. Today, we discuss what can we do in order to avoid 15 and 15.5% red wines, because we don't want that. And definitely we don't want that in our Rieslings. So vintages like 2019 and 2020 really put us in front of a lot of problems, actually, even though overall, we still consider ourselves as winners of global warming at the moment.
Well,
thank you, Susan, for your comment on the Oaksman.
I believe that we saw a person come off mute. I think Jonathan Matson, you had one quick question, and then we'll jump into the next wine. Jonathan, are you there? We're moving on. Well, we can head on into the next wine. So hopefully you have bottle number 2 open. So we'll continue with Germany, and we'll try out our next wine.
So our next wine, same again. Shouldn't taste them before, I can hardly speak. Very mouth-watering again. We now have, you all see the bottle in front of you, 2020 Rheingau. Weingut Robert Weil, Weingut, meaning wine estate. Robert Weil is the name of the wine estate. It's called Riesling Tradition, which is a basic wine, and the same again, only 11% alcohol. So you have the same lightness, but I don't know the figures. You notice a little bit more of residual sugar. Farming is organic, and as the estate before, those who are not familiar with German wines should have a look on the capsule, where you see this eagle symbol with the grape in it, which means that this wine estate is as well member of the VDP, which is the organization of Germany's top winemakers. It means Verband der Prädikatsweingüter. John, you can repeat that later on.
I look forward to trying that one.
It was founded in 1900, and I'm not sure 10 or 11. I think it was 1910. At the time, there was a lot of wine being mixed with other things, and not all wine was really pure nature. And that's why they founded this association, and it was called Association of Natural Winemakers. So saying they wanted to claim that they only use grapes and nothing, they had no additives whatsoever to boost quality of the wine. And that has turned into this organization, which has been around ever since then. They have about 200 members, and it's actually quite hard to become a member. You have to really show for many years that you produce a very high quality. And if you are a member and you do not produce high quality for 3 years, you get, when it comes to soccer, you get a yellow card first, which is a warning, and then you get a red card, which means the player has to go off field. And that's the same here. If you are shown the yellow card and you still for another year, you don't produce high quality, unfortunately, you have to leave. And quite a few producers had to leave the VDP in the last 20 years, like 1/3. They have exchanged. So it is quite an elite, and they have their own classification system. And you can also see that here on the capsule, it says VDP, Gutswein. And they have introduced already years ago a system of Gutswein, Ortswein, and Lagenwein. which means this is a simple, if you like, estate wine. So the grapes can come from all vineyards in the possession of this wine estate. Above in the Ortswein, the grapes come from one village, which is then also written on the label. And then you have the single vineyard wines, the Lagenweine, where the single vineyard is written on a label. That is a system that was introduced by the VDP and is now actually being taken over by the whole of the German wine industry. We will see a new German wine law, which has been passed already, and which will come into effect in 2026. So we have 5 years to change things. But that system of the VDP will actually become the new classification system, or the basis of a new classification system in Germany. We are in the Rheingau region, and Rheingau is a smaller wine growing region with about 3,000 hectares and 3,200 exactly. And the major grape variety is Riesling. Almost 78% of that region is planted with Riesling. It has the highest Riesling density in the world, as far as I know. Then we have 12% Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir, and that's basically it. And then a few other grape varieties. The Rheingau is well known for a few facts. One, Riesling. Secondly, Geisenheim University, which is the most important and oldest wine university in Germany and one of the best in the world, I guess. You have Kloster Eberbach, which is the cradle of viticulture in the Rheingau. You have old wine estates like Schloss Johannisberg, Schloss Vorrats, etc. So very long aristocratic history with a lot of high quality, very, very well-known wine estates. And you might know that for a long time in the United States, the synonym for Rhine Riesling was actually Johannisberg Riesling. And that comes from this wine estate, Schloss Johannisberg in the Rheingau. And that's also where the Spätlese, our late harvest wines, were invented or discovered, if you like. So the positive effect of botrytis on sweet wines was discovered in 1775 in the Rheingau. So quite an important region, quite small, only, I guess, 25 miles in length, and only at the most, I guess, 2 miles up the hill, and that's it. That's the whole region. A few villages, but of world renown. And the wine estate is also of world renown. Weingut Robert Weil is one of the most exclusive and one of the most expensive wine estates in Germany, with a long history. They're situated in Kiedrich in the Rheingau, and their wine label, as you can see it here, is really one of the best known, the most best known in Germany, and when it comes to Riesling, certainly in the world. The wine, as I told you, has a little bit of residual sugar, as you can notice, and they are working organic, but they are not certified organic. That's important for that wine estate, Robert Weil.
Hey, Stefan.
Yeah.
What we have 2 questions here, and out of the 2 questions, actually we have 3 now. So we have one from Jay. Very quick.
Yep.
Oh, hey Mark, if you're there, please go on mute. Or Alexa, if you can throw Mark on mute for us. So the question here: what type of soil is this being grown on? And
yes,
then
yeah, not a problem. I just been out today, and when I settle back in, I'll be able to. But, so I apologize for not giving you a better timeline, because I said I'd do it today. But
hey, Mark.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you.
So perhaps I just see the question of the soil type. I can't tell you because as I told you, this wine comes from lots of different sites of the wine estate. So the soil type in that wine is not so important. It is a blend of different vineyards of the wine estate and different soils of the wine estate. So you would not, nobody would say this is only slate or any other soil. It's a mix of the soils you find in the eastern part of the Rheingau. There's a color on the different colors. The different colors in Riesling come from various reasons. One is the amount of ripeness, and especially skin contact plays a very large role because these are both very young wines. So aging does not play a role here. It can be that the moment of harvesting can play a role. But I think in this case, it's mainly how long they've been on the lease and and especially how long they've been in contact with the skin, because usually they try to put away the skin quite quickly. But I don't know in either case how long they had skin contact.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'll ask Wendy again, and then we'll open it up for just a couple quick questions. But Wendy, what do you think about the other German wine?
I love it. Again, I'm all about this little residual sweetness on the end. I just love that. And I love your comment about how they discovered botrytis there in the 1700s, because the white wine that we've got from Bordeaux is actually from a botrytis region too. So it's kind of fun to have that echo between the two wines. I love the sweetness. Again, I'm repeating myself, but what is interesting, I think this wine has a lot of grip on the finish. I don't know if that makes sense. It seems to have, whereas the other one was very smooth and very linear and very long. This one is long, but it's got a great grip. It's got a really nice finish to it. This wine. I don't know if anybody else picked that up.
Awesome. Thanks, Wendy. And then one last question from Sarah over to you, Stefan, and then we'll jump over to Bordeaux. This wine seems to have some reductive notes. Is this vinified completely protectively?
I think it is. I'm actually not quite sure, but knowing their vinification, it's mainly in stainless steel. But I can't tell you in that wine exactly. Sometimes the wine growers, when they see that the wine becomes too steely and too focused, they put it at the end of vinification for a while in contact with air, and it could be that they've done it to the wine to give it this little bit more of a roundness for the finish.
Awesome.
Could it be the screw cap too? I don't know. Would the screw cap make a difference? I love a screw cap. I think it's awesome, but I wonder if that would make a little bit of a difference to that.
It makes a difference, but not in the short term. I think when you have the two wines we have now, one is with screw cap and one is with cork. If we have put the wild wine, one half with cork, one half with screw cap, I don't think we would now notice a big difference because it's so young. But we would definitely notice the difference in 3 years' time, because the screw cap actually safeguards a little bit of CO2, which we very often have in young Riesling. I'm sure you have made that experience. They're sometimes even slightly fizzy, and that's something which you still find even in a 3 or 4 year old screw capped Riesling, where in a Riesling with a cork, that disappears quite quickly. So you lose a little bit of the freshness, but you get a bit more of the roundness of the wine. So it depends on what you like, and it depends a little bit on the wine grower's philosophy, what he wants.
Yeah, it all comes down to the winemaker and the direction that they want their wine to be presented. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Stefan, for walking us through these two delicious wines. We'll go ahead and take a quick trip over to Bordeaux, and
John, can I just ask a quick question? You noticed they mentioned that the wines are vinified in purity. I never heard that phrase. Stefan, could you elaborate on what does it mean the grapes are vinified in purity?
I was also asking myself what it meant. I guess comes from translation, because it was coming from the German producer. When German producers talk about purity, usually what they're trying to say is what they look for in Riesling is this. It's not this roundness, broad shoulders, but it's these German Rieslings which are so super focused and super clean and clear, where you just have these especially the acidity which just cuts through the wine. I think that's what they mean by purity, but what they are trying to say here.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Gary, and Stefan, thanks for the answer. Well, yeah, we'll switch gears and we will go on over to Bordeaux. So travel with us over that way, and we'll go to our third wine. I hope that you guys have been enjoying them so far, and we'll turn it over to Wendy. Wendy, I'll throw it to you.
Thank you. Well, quite different because we've gone from single variety to blends. Of course, Bordeaux, it's what we do. We blend in Bordeaux. So this is a classic dry white blend, 50-50, which is really interesting. And it's all the more interesting because it comes from the Sauternes region. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, Sauternes has to be a sweet wine. But a lot of the Sauternes properties and more of the Sauternes properties are making dry white wines on the same terroir using the same grapes. But what we see, of course, is a slightly different blend. So in the dry whites, not always, but often we'll see a little bit more Sauvignon Blanc, which is the case here. Although the sweet wine of Giro does actually have quite a high percentage of Sauvignon Blanc compared to others, there's also a lot of dry 100% Semillon dry coming out of Sauternes and Barsac too. So it's actually quite fun to look for those wines at the moment. There's a lot of innovation in dry white winemaking in Sauternes. So just a word about where the Sauternes region is. Now, if they make a dry white wine, of course, they can't call it Sauternes. So this is appellation Bordeaux Blanc. And the dry white wines of Bordeaux, as I'm sure you're aware, it's a small part of Bordeaux. It's about 8 to 9% of Bordeaux production. It's a very popular part of Bordeaux, growing in popularity, but interestingly enough, not growing in planting very much. But so this is a dry white Bordeaux Blanc, 2019. The Sauvignon Semillon blend, and talking about the soil. So as a reminder, the Sauternes appellation is down in the southwest part of Bordeaux. So it's on the left bank, in the southern part of the left bank. So further south of Grave, Pessac-Lignon, then Grave, and then you get into Sauternes and Barsac. And here at Chateau Giro, so Chateau Giro is a Premier Grand Cru Classé. So it's a classified growth of the 1855 classification, a first growth. But of course, as we're looking at the dry white wine, we can't use the classification. The classification is only for red or for sweet white wines in 1855. So we're on the typical left bank terroir, so lots of gravel. So lots of gravel mixed in with some clay, mixed in with some sand. So that classic left bank. Same grapes as we're using for the Grand Vin de Sauternes, as I said. Now, the other advantage that this wine has is it's used in oak. So it's vinified in oak, partly in oak. 80% of the wine is vinified in oak. So the actual fermentation process happens in oak. And it's oak barrels that have already been used for the Sauternes, for the sweet wine. So in actual fact, this wine might taste a little sweeter than it really is. It's bone dry. But because it's been in those barrels that have had a little bit of Sauternes in them, it's getting a little bit of a free ride with those Sauternes barrels. And it's then aged in oak. Let me just remind myself, I think it's 80%, it's 7 months. So as well as the vinification, which takes about 3 weeks, it's actually had 7 months aging in oak barrels. So you've got this balance between the fruit and the oak. And I hope you'll agree it's a balance, because what we have to be really careful with these dry white wines is not to over oak. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to support them and to carry them. And one of the ways we do this, of course, is aging on the lees, stirring the lees, the sort of Burgundian technique. I'm allowed to say that, even though I'm from Bordeaux. And so the stirring of the lees, which allows us to get all the advantages of the oak, but not that the oak overpowers. And of course, it also gives this mid palate, this sort of fatness, if you like, of the wine on the mid palate. So you have a little taste. So obviously, very, very different on the nose from the wines that we've had previously. That influence of the oak is quite clear.
While Wendy's tasting, I believe, Stefan, we have the wines get to you as well.
No, John, the wines have not arrived here in Germany.
I'm sorry.
No.
We have
I
changed.
get the German wines, you don't get the Bordeaux
Yeah,
wines.
I think
What
it's a bit
about?
of a. It's just.
I think that's got to be German efficiency, right?
It shows you the problems we have at the moment with transporting wine all over the world. It's just, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get it tomorrow morning and then I'll, well, taste it tomorrow. But I'm just drinking water and Riesling now, unfortunately. It's sad listening to you.
Yeah. Well, and also we were talking about organics earlier. So yes, Chateau Giro was certified organic in 2011. They'd actually been using organic practices for quite a long time before that. And I think I'm right in saying it was the first classified growth in Bordeaux to have an organic certification. And they're now under biodynamics. So they were very, very innovative in that, which is, if you're familiar, as I'm sure you are, with the process of making Sauternes, was a very brave challenge to take on. So.
Well, I will open up to any questions. It looks like we had one from Sarah coming in that was saying the grass notes are quite subtle. Does this estate commonly engage in leaf pulling with the intention of reducing this component?
I think it comes more from the influence of the Semillon, to be honest, because the grassy notes are something that we associate very much with Sauvignon Blanc as a rule. And because we've got this quite high percentage of Semillon, which gives a more richness to the wine, but it's also, I think, the signature in that we tend to get, especially on these warmer gravel soils, of the Sauvignon Blanc tends to be a little bit more floral rather than grassy. That sort of this white blossom type aroma tends to be more typical of these Sauvignon Blancs on these slightly warmer terroirs than you'd perhaps get on cooler, more limestone terroir, and very much so. I think it's that mixture, and also I think the influence of the oak makes a difference to that as well. Do they do? I don't know. I would imagine they do some leaf pulling, but that really depends on the vintage. That's the answer that everybody tells you for every question you ever ask in Bordeaux. Depends on the vintage, because we're very aware now with this climate change and these warmer summers that we're having, that actually leaving the leaves on the vines allows us to get a little bit more shade in the berries, especially for the white wine, so to keep them a little bit cooler. So I'm not sure it comes from that. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Perfect answer. Well, I'll open it up if anybody wants to go off of mute and ask a question, and then we'll jump into our final wine.
What is the total production of this wine?
Let me look at my crib notes. Off the top of my head, 180,000 bottles on average. You have to do the maths for the cases, but it's about 100, yeah. Which is a little bit more than the Sauternes production. Of course, the yields are a lot higher. We're looking at yields here at about 50 hectare, whereas, of course, for the Sauternes, it's going to be closer to 12, 15, perhaps 20 in a good year. So.
Depending upon the pack, if that's a 12 pack, that's 15,000, and if it's a 6 pack, it's 30,000 for the cases.
Oh, and I like this question. What are the main driving factors leading producers to make dry white wine? I'll tell you what it is. You guys aren't drinking enough Sauternes. That's the problem. Sauternes is a really fabulous wine. I'm a big fan of Sauternes, so I'll beat the drum for it just a little bit. It's a wonderful wine, and it is perceived as being expensive. It's not, relatively, when you look at the cost of production, and it's difficult to sell. It's difficult to make it, especially with the climate change. The last few years have been really, really hard between frost and mildew and hail. It's been really, really hard to produce Sauternes in the last few years. The advantage of a dry white wine, of course, it's a lot more affordable to make, and we're picking it earlier. So we pick these grapes when they're beautifully ripe. We don't have to wait for the botrytis. So we've got a greater chance of getting a great vintage in for a dry white wine than we do have for Sauternes. So you've got this possibility to make these volumes of wines that you can sell that are extremely popular. This, as I said earlier, this dry white wine sector is very, very popular. So it's a passion for dry white wine, but it's also cash flow, to be honest. So the answer to that is buy them, but buy the Sauterne as well. Do these guys a favor. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Wendy, we're actually working with Christy Norman out of Las Vegas, a sommelier, on another part of our Clink Different program. And she was actually reporting recently where Vegas is clearly open and people are going back and enjoying restaurants and a lot of things. And by the way, travel just opened back into the United States where it's much easier to get in. So things are kind of quote unquote getting back to normal. And what Christy has seen recently is that Sauterne is like one of the largest increasing categories in all of her restaurants right now. People are much more comfortable with it, ordering it and discovering it. And she says it has been an absolute blessing within her restaurant that she's at.
Well, I'm thrilled. And I think what's really interesting, and I'll stop talking about Sauterne in a minute, I promise. But I think what is really interesting, it's a great by the glass serve. It really is a great by the glass serve. And what is wonderful is if you open a bottle of Sauterne, it will keep. It will keep for several weeks if you keep it in the fridge and recork it. So I think a lot of people, a lot of somms not necessarily, but a lot of people are nervous about opening the bottle and thinking they're not going to finish it. And can I serve it by the glass? It goes great with cheeses. It's great aperitif. But yes, you can serve it by the glass because it does have that, you know, that ability to stay and age in the bottle. So wow, yeah. Ageability of these wines compared to Sauterne. Well, Sauterne will effectively keep forever, so it's a bit of a hard comparison. But because these wines have got really great acidity and they've been barrel aged and barrel fermented, they do have the aging potential. And that high percentage of Semillon also makes them really interesting because that even dry Semillon, as it ages, it just evolves into these honeyed notes, into these lovely sort of beeswaxy notes as it gets a little bit older. So you get this wonderful evolution on these wines. So yes, they do have aging potential.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we'll use this as our palate cleanser. We've had 3 wonderful white wines, and I believe we have a red wine for our finale. And we'll move into our 4th wine. And by the way, I know that we are bleeding over a little bit. This was a 75-minute segment. We had said at the beginning 60 minutes, but we're going to continue on, and please continue to join us. Again, ask questions as we're going. But off of the Sauterne, Stefan, I'm gonna say that we can definitely look at doing a Trunkenbeeren Auslese next time, or we can do an Eiswein next time. So I just needed to get my German pronunciation out there for you.
Sounded wonderful. I'm very proud of you. But I can I can agree with what Wendy said. Those wines are unfortunately underrated as a wine you can really build beautifully into a menu. We use these kind of the German version, of course, Wendy, but we use Eiswein Trockenbeeren often when we receive people, just to give everyone just just a small drop out of a small bottle. And it always brings smiles on people's faces because of the enormous sweetness. And often here in Germany, sweet wines are completely out of fashion. You should never tell anybody that you like sweet wines, otherwise people would think that you know nothing about wine. And both Sauterne and Germany, we have some of the best sweet wines in the world, and it's a bit of a shame that they are not being used as often as they should be, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And I just see this question from Austin about Sauterne cocktails. It's fun when you go to Sauterne now. Very often in a chateau, they'll serve you, but you get the Perrier thing. But the other thing that's really trendy now is to put ice cubes in your Sauterne with a twist of orange peel. So that's one to try, especially a lot of the second wines of the chateaus. So yeah. And as you say, reel in the young people. We're all over that. That's all good.
Yeah, it's we've always called it the fajita effect. It's that sizzling thing. So if you see a nice glass of wine going by with a slice of orange and some ice cubes, people are like, "Hey, what's that?" So it definitely draws in the attention. So we'll jump into our final wine. Alexa, if you don't mind going to the next slide, and Wendy, I'll give the floor to you as well.
With pleasure. So Auberge Libéral, so Chateau Auberge Libéral, we're in the 1855 classification, but we're still on the left bank, but we've gone way north. We've almost gone from one extreme to the other of Bordeaux. And Bordeaux is a pretty big place, so we've kind of gone 150 miles from north to south. And we're in Pauillac. So Grand Cru Classé of Pauillac. So just to remind that 1855 classification hasn't really changed that much, but Pauillac has a large percentage, the highest percentage of all the classified growths within the appellation, including, of course, 3 of the first growths, Lafitte, Latour, and Mouton. And this property, Auberge Libéral, is right next door to Latour. So it's actually in between the vines of Chateau Latour and the vines of Pichon Baron, which are 2 first growth and second growth of the 1855 classification. So it's in a pretty good neighborhood. It's in a village, it's got Bage on the name because it's in the village of Bage. So within Pauillac, you've got several different villages, and Bage is quite a famous village. When you drive up, so we've got this road called the D2, La Route des Châteaux, which is a little bit like driving up a wine list. So for the lucky people that are going to win this trip, I'm sure they're going to be driving up the D2, up the backbone of the Medoc. And as you drive up, it's just before you get to the town of Pauillac, you get this village of Bage. And I'm sure you've heard of Lynch Bage, there's Croisé Bage, there's Auberge Libéral. So it's a property that takes its name from the place, which happens a lot. What happens a lot in these names of these chateaux is you get the name of the place and you get the name of the family. And it was owned by the Libéral family. So that's why you get this Bage Libéral. And haute, of course, means high, which is a slight exaggeration because I'm sure, as you know, in the Medoc, it's definitely not high. It's super flat. But, you're probably at about 30 odd meters above sea level, which is a big deal. Every meter counts in the Medoc. It's nothing like our friends in Germany. So it's very different. So Pauillac, of course, again, we're looking at blends, and the signature when we're looking at Pauillac is, of course, Cabernet Sauvignon, dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. Why? Because this property is right on the riverbank, the estuary, the Gironde estuary as it is. And as the closer you get to the estuary, the more gravel you have in the soil. You have this Garonnais or this Gunsian gravel, this white gravel. So we don't have slopes, but we have gravel. So the drainage that we need for the hydric stress for Cabernet Sauvignon comes from the gravel. And of course, the gravel is very white, very bright in color. So it reflects the sun. It's lovely and warm. So it allows the Cabernet to ripen. Now, traditionally up in the Medoc, we're really at the northern limit of where Cabernet Sauvignon will really ripen. So that gives us this freshness and this elegance in the wine. And of course, we've talked in previous seminars about climate change and grape variety change. And so this may well change. We've still got the Merlot in there. And one of the reasons for this is these properties are quite large. So you do have a variation in soil. You get these little gravel outcrops. So you get this mixture of gravel with some sand and some clay. And where you get the clay on sort of along the bottom of these gravel outcrops, you have a cooler soil, which is better suited to Merlot, which can become quite flabby if you allow it to get overripe. So we've got these different soils that are reflected in the blend of the grape varieties of the property. 2018, it's a very nice vintage. I actually decanted mine before I drank it. Tasted it. I get a big giveaway. It is 10 o'clock at night here, so I did have a bit of a head start on you guys. And what is interesting, I think, is to look at this notion of blend, to know that it's not a recipe. It changes from vintage to vintage. So when you look at the planting in the vineyard, it's not necessarily what you end up with in the vintage. So when we look at the planting across the property, it's what you have here, 65-35. But in this vintage in 2018, there's a little bit more Cabernet, the 70% Cabernet. And what have we got? There's 30. It actually says 21% Merlot. So I don't know what the mystery grapes are. She might have some Petit Verdot in there. Anyway, there's a little bit less. What I'm trying to say is it's not a recipe. Every year it changes a little bit depending on the climate. And we did have a lovely in 2018, although it was a bit tricky to begin with. We had a little bit of hail, we had quite a lot of humidity, things picked up as of mid-July, and we had a wonderful warm summer with nice cool nights, which is really important to keep that freshness that we're looking for. And so it allowed us to really wait in excellent conditions to allow the Cabernet Sauvignon to ripen. So it might be the reason why there's a little bit more Cab in the 2018 than there is planted, simply because we have this we had this possibility to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, which is what we like to do when the conditions allow us to do that. Aubage Libéral is owned by Claire Villard. Claire Villard also has Château Ferrières in Margaux, and both her properties are now organic. I think in 2018, this was under conversion. It's now organic and biodynamic. She's married to Gonzague Lurton, who has a biodynamic property in Margaux. I think they were on a previous seminar, if I remember correctly. So big advocates of biodynamics and soil health and biodiversity and all that great stuff that we talked about in previous seminars. What else can I say? Barrel aged, 16 months in oak and 40% new oak. Which is a fairly, this level of property is a fairly normal, I think, percentage of new French oak, of course. Any question? Well, let's taste the wine.
So we've had three nice white wines before jumping into a wonderful blend. Any thoughts or? Please unmute, and happy to hear the thoughts of all.
Yeah. Yes, I understand they are experimenting with amphora. Excuse me. There's a lot of that going on in Bordeaux. They don't mention it in the text sheet for this vintage, so they might not have done it in 2018. I think it's a relatively new thing. And the idea, of course, of using the amphora is it's another reason to keep this freshness. You know, we're all about keeping the freshness. And this is amazing because this wine has quite a high alcohol level. You can see that, but it doesn't taste alcoholic. You've really got this freshness. You've got this fresh acidity. When I was decanting it earlier, the aromas are quite spectacular. These dark berry type aromas kind of jumped out of the bottle at me as I was decanting this wine. And I think you can again, you've got this fresh fruit aroma. So 2018, it would have been bottled only just over a year ago. And so it's still a relatively young wine, but amazingly, for me, accessible when you think of a classified growth from Pauillac, drinking it quite so young. It is amazingly round and accessible. And I think this is very much a signature of the type of wines that they're producing, but also the type of wines that we're seeing coming out of Bordeaux now. Takes nothing away from their aging ability, but they're not as closed as they used to be. The tannins are very smooth, very round. The fruit is very vibrant. And if you speak to Claire, she'll also tell you it's all about biodiversity. And I think she mentioned that in the previous, if you go back and watch that previous seminar, this notion of freshness really coming from the cover crops, from the biodiversity within her estate. She really thinks that this has helped the freshness of the wine.
Awesome. Well, Wendy, thank you so much. And special treat, just snuck in, Nicholas Pfaff was able to join us and would love to be able to open the floor to Nicholas. We sampled your wine about 30 minutes ago. And Stefan, I'll let you and Nicholas be able to jump in, and if there's any questions that we'd love to be able to have from the group over to Nicholas from Weingut Robert Weil. And I tried my pronunciation best on that, Stefan. I'm sorry. So
I think you're doing pretty well.
Nicholas, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. First of all, great apologies from my side. It somehow I got bamboozled. I don't know how I got there, but I somehow thought it starts 8 p.m. And then when I came in, I was just like, okay, that's a little bit different. different start than what I expected. So a very dearly apologize for my delay. Very un-German, I will admit to that. So yeah, I think you have a wonderful wine tonight with the Riesling tradition. Very important wine. I will say I really like the format. I'm very happy that Wines of Germany and the Vin de Bordeaux have joined and worked together, because I'm a big admirer of Bordeaux. But coming to the Rheingau, Steffen, you already told me there were some questions.
Yeah, we had the question because there was the term purity in the description of the wine. So there was a question about the purity. There was a question about the soil types. I said that as it is Gutswein, different kinds of soils from your different vineyards. I hope I didn't say something wrong. And I personally would like to know about the residual sugar.
Yeah, I think I start with the salts, because we all know how important the salts are for us. Robert Weil Estate is in the Rheingau, and we have something very special, because we are, I would not say very typical for Rheingau, because we are not directly at the Rhine River. We are up in the hill on the highest elevation with very cool conditions. And furthermore, the vineyards all contain slate. When you hear slate, usually it's first thing you think it's Mosel. And then you come to Robert Weil and all you hear is slate. And this is and this brings me also to the purity. I think for those of you who have the wine in the glass, who have the Riesling tradition in the glass, it has a very pure and straight characteristic. It has this characteristic that sometimes reminds you maybe a little bit more of Moselle. But on the other hand, it has the richness and the majestic characteristic that is more typical for Rheingau. And I think the purity really is also reflected when you see in the color. It is an off-dry wine, but it has a very pure color. It is pure in its taste, with a great focus on the fruit of Riesling, but also with a great pure acidity. So talking about salts, everything that we have is slate, really. Cool. I didn't get the what you said in the end. What was the other question, or what you were most interested in?
I would like to know about the sweetness level.
Sweetness level, yes, important for that wine. The 2019 is actually 25 grams. With the 2020, we have gone a little bit drier. We do not have the 2019 anymore here, so this is why I'm having the 2020 right now next to me, which is slightly drier with 23 grams. We always like to keep the tradition, some sort of that part. I think I had some Thai food earlier, and for that I think it's a really ideal pairing, because let's say the wine gets even purer with the spiciness of a Thai food.
We should have asked our visitor, our listeners, how much sugar they were expecting. I was expecting less.
That's really the key, but this is again really our big advantage that we have, because of this cooler conditions up in the hill on the highest elevations, and together with a high acidity and the slate, which gives the acidity also a little bit more of a kick. You do not get the impression of sweetness that much. So the acidity is really the backbone of it, and this really helps us to keep a really, let's say that it's not tasting too sweet. It is a blending of different parcels. As Steffen said earlier, it is a blend. It's Gutswein, so it's our estate level. It's really the basic wine. It's a blend of all vineyards of Robert Weil. But the special thing about Robert Weil Estate is really that all the vineyards are located within 2 kilometers or one mile, pretty much, around the winery. And they are all on the highest elevation, and they all contain that slate that we have, the Phylite slate, which is a gray bluish type of slate.
And Nicholas, you're getting quite a few compliments in our chat over here about just how elegantly you've balanced this wine and allowed the acidity to play with the residual sugar.
Wonderful. Now I'm always happy to hear that. Especially when you keep in mind that 19 as well as 20 or also 18 have been really warm vintages. For us, it's always in the end, it sounds a little bit easy, but for us, it's always important that in the end, a wine can never taste better than the berry it was produced from. So in the end, for us, what really matters is, of course, we check pH levels, we check the acidity and the oxalate and everything. But in the end, what really matters is if the berry tastes great, then you can also make a great wine. And that's in the end, it sounds simple, but in the end, you can never produce a wine that is better than the berry it is coming from. So that's really crucial for us. And I think our team did a really good job in 19, also in 20, to still keep this lively and fresh characteristic that you need for such wines.
Well, Nicholas, you had a very kind compliments also coming from our other host, Wendy Narby, who is a Bordeaux resident, and this was one of her most recent times drinking German wine, and she had compliments across the board as well.
Oh, lovely! Yeah, great pleasure to hear that. That's you always like to hear those compliments. That's makes always good to get the approval for what we're doing, especially from people living in such a great city as Bordeaux and having contact with so many great wines directly out of the front door.
Well, we are running into time, so please, if anybody wants to stay with us and continue to ask questions. Alexa, if you don't mind jumping forward, because I do want to be able to keep our promise from the beginning of who wants to win a trip to go over and actually visit Bordeaux and visit Germany. So for our sweepstakes, the Clink Different sweepstakes, we are in the final month of being able to participate in this and have your chance to win this grand prize trip for two. It's an $18,000 value. It's 2 people get to go, 1 winner, 2 people. About 6 days, 1 day of travel, and 2 days in each of the regions. You're going to have a wonderful time. The itinerary is absolutely fantastic. So easiest thing to do is go to clinkdifferent.com. So stay in touch with us. Go to Clink Different. There's a ton of literature there. There's a ton of different ways to be able to interact, both with CIVB and also with DWI, or basically our sponsors of the entire Clink Different campaign. But you can go to clinkdifferent.com, and if you see anything that looks like this, you'll actually have pop-ups, and there's banners on there for you to be able to register for this sweepstakes for your chance to win. Or you can just go directly to clinkdifferent.com/experience the wines of Europe sweepstakes. It's a mouthful, but it is the branding that we do have. So enter once per day, and I believe that the registration for this closes on November 26th. I will have to double check that, but it's right there when you're going through the registration process. So please enter once per day. Send it to family, friends, anybody and everybody for this once in a lifetime trip. That being said, again, please, and thank you to everybody here. You guys were the backbone of our entire Clink Different seminar series. We do truly appreciate everybody, and we would love to be able to stay connected with you. But stick around because we'll continue to answer just a few questions. So if anybody wants to go off of mute and ask any questions, we just had a huge question come in from somebody, Antoinette. So if Antoinette, you would like to be able to go off of mute, I'd be happy to let you ask your question.
I can answer the question. I've read it.
Oh, Antoinette's at work, so I hope that you're drinking the wine on the side. But Stefan, if you'd like to recap the question and go ahead and dive on in.
Yeah, the question from Antoinette was about the EU regulation, EU new organic legislation. The EU in March, 25th of March this year, has issued its Green Deal, and the Greens said that by 2030, the European wants that 25% of the whole of European agriculture, not just viticulture, but agriculture, should have to be certified organic. And that, of course, also means that viticulture should go more organic than it is today. They have agreed on 23 measures, and out of these three are important for us. One is they want to promote the consumption of organic wine, which is great. They want to increase the production of organic wine, and thirdly, they want to improve sustainability. Those are the three which really matter to us, to viticulture. and that will give a very big push, I hope, another additional push to increasing the amount of sustainable and organic winemaking, both in Germany and Bordeaux and the rest of Europe. It's European. Antoinette says they want to introduce an easier system. To be honest, I don't know about this. I wasn't aware of the fact. I don't think that I've read that they would lower the thresholds for making these wines or the legislation, but I look into that. But what I know, I've told you now, but I certainly have a look if this new Green Deal also means that they would like to soften up a little bit the system. I don't think so. I haven't read that, but I'll certainly have to check.
Maybe not ease as in loosen the certification process or protocols, but maybe make it a smoother system to be able to actually gain that rigorous standard. It looks like we had a question come in from Jay over to Nicholas. Elevation of your vineyards, sir, that you are using today for the wine that we had today.
We are starting at 780 feet today, and we're going up to 990 feet. So we are talking about 280 meters to 300, 240 meters to 300 meters. So this is what the elevation, what we are currently looking for. And this is really, let's say, Kietrich is really at the upper end of the Rheingau vineyards.
It's like when you drive from, if you know the Alsace from France and you drive north, you'll drive through the Pfalz region, the Rhine-Hessen region, you cross the Rhine, you get to the Rheingau, you drive further on, you get to wine estate Weil and their vineyards, and behind on the hill, there are the forests, and that is the end of viticulture. When you can drive as far north as you want from there, there is was no more viticulture in the old days. So it was really very far in the north and in addition, very high up. So because we were talking, Nicola, about you're actually so far higher up.
Sorry, I had a bad connection. Can you just repeat it, please?
Yeah, Stefan's coming in and out from our side as well, and he's frozen now. So
okay, just maybe I think he wanted to ask about elevation. So we are currently, I mean, when we look on the estate 100 years ago or 150 years ago when the estate was founded, we were in an absolutely bad shape because simply you could say we had the problem that, let's say, our founder could achieve ripeness in 3 vintages out of 10, a full ripeness, and where he could produce world-class wines on the slopes that you see in my background. In the other 7, he had to fight to achieve even ripeness, and this has changed really dramatically. So I think what Stefan really was also, or maybe he can tell us in a little bit, what's really important is we have to look maybe to go up a little bit further. Currently, we have no plans. We are happy in the where we are right now, but we are definitely looking into that possibility.
Yeah, Nicolas, I hope you can hear me now. I was just, because you weren't there, we were talking about global warming earlier on, and I think you are actually in a quite a good position that you are already a bit higher up in the Rheingau, and even though you are higher up, you even think of moving up further. So that shows our guests a little bit the challenges we are facing.
Yeah, it is. Let's say it's really odd because, let's say, 30 years ago, you would ask yourself, how do I achieve ripeness? Or let's say 40, 50 years, it was really the question, how do I achieve ripeness? And in the meantime, we really look on the way, how do I avoid over-ripeness? Because as soon as you get overripe, wine like the Riesling tradition would get really flabby. And I just also read the comment that the wine, even with temperature, is getting more elegant and more opened up. And this also shows you because it's not overripe, it's not losing its elegance and its purity. And that's something that if you had an overripe, if you had overripeness, this would immediately happen. And you're absolutely right. It sounds very odd to say that, especially in days like this, to say you're winners of global warming, but we're as you said, we're in a really good place right now because we can still achieve the classic cool climate Riesling style, even in a hot year like 19 or 20.
Well, I'll do a quick last call. Do we have any last questions for Wendy or for Stefan or for our guest Nicholas? With that, I'll open it up to one or two last questions. We have another one coming from Antoinette. Antoinette, if you're on a computer or if you're using your thumbs are moving very quickly with these questions. So what is the perspective of German producers when thinking about changing to warmer climate-friendly varieties, non-traditional German varieties versus changing to higher lands? Great question.
Great question. And I think for Weingut Robert Weil, I don't think you even have ever thought about changing grape varieties. You are a Riesling wine grower, but in other German regions, we do see that what we call exotic grape varieties have become quite popular in this country. We grow, I have printed it out here, we grow Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Cabernet Franc, Tempranillo, even in Germany, and we can ripen them. They are certainly not meant for exporting because there is enough wine of these grape varieties outside of Germany in the world. But the German consumers, they love these grape varieties. They love a German Merlot. They love to taste the German Cabernet Sauvignon. So I think we're going to see even more of these in Germany. There is a trend, but it's always going to stay a niche. We will never become a Syrah country or we will never challenge a Bordeaux, and we don't want to. I think we'll definitely stay with what we can do best, and that's Riesling and Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir. Nicolas, I think you agree.
Very much. I mean, we had a very small portion of Pinot Noir 10 years ago, which we decided to stop and go for 100% Riesling. So for us, it's our vineyards are tailor-made for Riesling. We are optimistic we have the very true belief that in the next for the next generations there will be the possibility to grow Riesling on our slopes, and so that's not even worth thinking about, I would say. So you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you to everybody. Wendy, thank you for staying up so late, especially on your holiday.
Pleasure.
And Stefan, thank you, sir. Always wonderful to see you both. And Nicholas, thank you for coming and joining us here and being able to answer some questions. To all of our participants, thank you guys again for participating in the seminar series. And we look forward to being able to stay in touch with you all. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Auf Wiedersehen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Tschüss.
Au revoir.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.